Hi, and welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. We're going to take a look at some everyday cybersecurity lessons that we can gather from this week's ThreatTraq stories. I'm here this week with Karen Simon. How are you, Karen?
Well, Don, how about yourself?
Great. Let's talk about the stories that you and John Hogenboom covered this week. John brought us a story about yet two more big ransomware attacks. Tell me about that.
Yeah, they were both from Europe. One was a Norwegian infrastructure company, and the second one was the Irish Health Service, and they were both struck by these ransomware attacks. So just kind of following along on the Colonial Pipeline incident, that companies that have low thresholds for being out are being targeted by these bad guys.
So what can we learn from this rash of ransomware attacks?
Well, I think the biggest thing we can all do is just obviously try to prepare for them. So number one is these usually occur because somebody has some kind of phishing incident that somebody clicks on something that they shouldn't. So obviously it's really important for everyone to have education within their companies about what the employees should look for to make sure that they're not falling for these phishing campaigns. But then understanding that these things are possible, it's really important for us to be prepared if we have an outage. So you need to make plans ahead of time to understand that if you have an outage, how are you going to recover? Know that before it actually occurs. And then actually, if you could practice amongst your team to say, what would you do once these incidents do occur, so that at least you can have a best chance of recovering and not having to pay the ransom. Because the more companies pay the ransom, the more emboldened the cyber criminals will be.
Now, you brought us a story about some new guidelines for creating strong passwords. Tell me about that.
Yeah, NIST just came out with some new recommendations about how we should handle our password security, that just doing what we've been doing all along isn't really working in terms of asking people to just reset their passwords or mandating a specific type with a certain number of random characters. They're making some recommendations that include potentially having some kind of dynamic blacklist that you can check your password against to see as soon as they might be out there as being compromised, that you can shut down your systems immediately and force that person to change the password only when there has been some breach of that password.
John brought us a story about some security cameras that really aren't so secure. Tell me about that.
This is one of those, we've had a few of these before where actually people who were using a particular brand of security camera actually logged in and were able to see other people's cameras, as well as some recordings that had happened previously. And so obviously the users were quite alarmed.
What is the way people protect themselves from these kind of vulnerabilities in security cameras?
Well, in this situation, it was actually caused by a server upgrade of the company's infrastructure. So once the company was notified, it was less than a day before they were able to figure out what had happened. And it was an easy fix for them to do because it was within just one server rather than within the devices themselves. But what John and I talked about is that the more devices we have in our homes, and they continue to proliferate, and they will over the next few years, is that we have to make sure that these devices themselves are updated. So it's really important to look at these devices regularly and understand if they're getting automatically updated. Some companies automatically update the firmware while others are older or less sophisticated, and then you need to go out and find the new firmware and download it itself. So we need to just be aware, and obviously you always want to change passwords of your devices. Don't let the standard one that came with the box, like admin or password or whatever it is, make sure you change that as soon as you kind of install it in your home.
And finally, you brought us a story about some recent college graduates that brought their caps and gowns but got a lot more than they bargained for when they did that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the company that sells these cap and gowns to hundreds of universities and colleges across the country was hacked. And unbeknownst to them, when the students or their parents were logging in to order their caps and gowns, their credentials, their passwords, and usernames were stolen. Their credit card information was stolen and then subsequently quickly published in the dark web, or so it seems. The company was completely unaware that this had occurred, and they just found out through students posting that they were that this had occurred to them, and actually the social media together figured out that the thing that was all in common here was that they had all purchased their cap and gowns from the same company. So this is happening a lot, as you can imagine, in one particular college. So, 30 friends all of a sudden have these fraudulent charges on their credit card.
So to protect yourself from something like this, I guess it's really important to keep track of the charges on your credit card, isn't it?
Absolutely. So John outlined a few ways that you can do this. All the credit card companies have alerts if, something over a certain amount is charged. Kids, you can all look on your charges on a regular basis using apps or just logging in to make sure. But also, I think it's a great idea to have some kind of alerts or push notifications from your phone, especially, for presumably a lot of these college kids don't have huge credit limits, so ways to kind of control that more carefully. So in this case, sadly, there was no notification from the company. It really just came about from these experiences of all these students.
Well, thank you for that great advice, Karen. Thank you all for watching. If you want to keep up on great advice like this every week, like and subscribe below. And if you want to take a deeper look in any of these stories, click on them and watch them in more depth. We'll see you next time.